Hey everybody, it's Chainsaw Reacts, and welcome to the Chainsaw Reacts podcast, episode number 6. Today's podcast is all about Star Wars. Earlier this week, we got huge news about the title of the first spin-off film in the Star Wars universe moving forward, of course, bought by Disney back in 2012, and now we have our first official title, Star Wars Rogue One. I'm also going to be discussing, after talking a little bit about Rogue One and what I think it's going to be about, I'm also going to be talking about Star Wars The Force Awakens, talking about a potential trailer that's going to be coming out in the near future, maybe, who knows, and then after that, talking about Star Wars The Force Awakens, my thoughts and opinions on all of that and that entire film in general. I'm also going to talk about Star Wars Episode 8 and 9 a little bit after that, and talk about the prequel Star Wars films, episodes 1 through 3, the prequel trilogy, and also talk about Star Wars, the original trilogy a little bit to end off. Of course, in the description is all of the links, not links, tags, times, basically, that starts when you guys can skip to a particular part of the podcast and hear a particular Star Wars topic. Rambling on, I'm messing up already. Anyways, guys, let's jump into the first topic, Star Wars Rogue One. So I wanted to start off by reading what StarWars.com posted about Rogue One, and of course the confirmation of who is writing and directing Star Wars Episode 8, but I'll get to that a little bit later about Star Wars Episode 8. I'm going to read about Rogue One first. So, here's what it's basically said about Rogue One. Rogue One is the title for the first film in a unique series of big-screen adventures that explores the characters and events beyond the core Star Wars saga, which is basically Episodes 1 through 6 and now 7, 8, and 9. Rogue One will be directed by Gareth Edwards, who has done Monsters and Godzilla, the newest one, the 2014 Godzilla, not 1998, and written by Oscar nominee Chris Weitz. I'm probably mispronounced his name, and if I did, I'm sorry. Says Cinderella, About a Boy and Ants. The first actress cast is Felicity Jones, who garnered an Academy Award nomination and critical acclaim for her performance in The Theory of Everything. The idea for the story of Rogue One came from John Knoll, an Academy Award-winning visual effects supervisor and chief creative officer at Industrial Light and Magic. He will executive produce along with Simon Emanuel and Jason McGatlin, Kathleen Kennedy, and Tony Toe. Are on board to produce, and John Swartz will co-produce. John Swartz is he's attached to Star Wars: The Force Awakens. He'll be co-producing. The film starts shooting this summer in London, so this summer in 2015, and is due for release on December 16th, 2016. Now, this is really interesting because December of this year in 2015, we'll be getting Star Wars The Force Awakens, of course. That's episode number 7, starting the new trilogy, the sequel trilogy, as everyone calls it. That's been rumored forever, and Disney finally is bringing us a sequel trilogy. So a year later after that, in December of 2016, basically one entire year later, we're getting a spin-off film. Now, for the longest time, we've known that there are spin-off films coming. Disney did announce at the time when 7, 8, 9, or shortly after, that there was going to be spin-off films happening in between these episodes 7, 8, 9 of the Star Wars main core, the main storyline. So we just had all these speculations of what the first film was going to be when they announced that soon after, when Godzilla was a huge success, that Gareth Edwards was coming on board to direct, that there was a huge talks about what the first film was going to be about. And for some reason, this rumor just kept popping up, this idea and this theory that basically Star Wars Rogue One, that officially has a name, Rogue One, was going to be about the original stealing of the Death Star plans from the bounty hunters. And the bounty hunters were going to be basically stealing the original Death Star plans for the rebels. Now, that has been speculated, and even after this official title, people are still thinking that it might still be a part of the story, or this might not be completely involved at all. Now, the bigger question is that where in the timeline is Rogue One going to be at? Because everyone hearing the words Rogue One as the subtitle for the Star Wars spinoff is that it's going to be talking about the original Rogue Squadron. Now, that might be interesting to see. I mean, regardless of what the film is about, I'm interested to see it anyways. But if it's about Rogue Squadron, the original Rogue Squadron, Rogue One, as the subtitle, that's a pretty cool idea. But if it is about the original stealing of the Death Star plans before the events of Episode 4, A New Hope, then this film is taking place in the past versus is somewhere in between the times of Episode 6 and 7, which is like a 30-year gap. Because at the end of Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, there is 30 years of gap. But we don't know. There's no confirmation of when this film, what timeline it is in. But let's say hypothetically that Rogue One is in the past. If it is somewhere around the time of episodes 3 or 4, because there's a huge gap there of episodes 3 and 4. So let's say that it does happen in between episodes 3 and 4, Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. Let's say it does. Then that means that Disney are up for basically doing films that are going to be taking place anywhere in the saga, anywhere outside of that timeline. They will basically pick a timeline to do a film. So that means that the second spin-off film coming out hypothetically in 2018, if we're getting a Star Wars film every year, then basically the spin-off film, the second one after Star Wars Episode 8, could be a spin-off film that happens in the events between episode 1 and 2, or it could be between episodes, 6 and 7, or it could be between episodes 5 and 6, or 4 and 5. You see what I'm saying here? So once we know the definitive timeline that the Star Wars Rogue One is going to be set, then we'll know where Disney's head at. Because if the events happen between episodes 7 and 8 before episode 8, because this film comes out before Star Wars Episode 8. So if this film does take place in the hypothetical situation between 7 and 8, then the assumption is that the spin-off film that's happening in between 8 and 9 is going to be in the same timeline. It's what's happening in between 8 and 9 with these sub-characters that you may or may have not have seen in Force Awakens. It just all depends on the timeline. So if it's set in that timeline of 30 years later, it's during the events of The Force Awakens, or after or before 8, then I'm fine with that, because that means we're still kind of staying in the context. We're not seeing Star Wars The Force Awakens in 2015, and it's 30 years after the events of Episode 6. And then Star Wars, the Star Wars Rogue One, is going to be taking us back to the events between 3 and 4. Now we're backtracking. Now we have to make sure we understand the ending of 3 and the beginning of 4, or both those films, so we kind of know where the gap is and what timeline. But if it's stuck within the timeline of we're in the present time in the Star Wars universe with Episode 7, and it's happening during those events, then we don't have to worry too much, but who knows. So they could make Rogue One a very unique film about a sub-character that you might see in Force Awakens, and that sub-character is the main character of Rogue One, or it could be completely out of nowhere, and it could be completely about a different story that has no real relevance to the 7, 8, 9. That'd be cool as well. But who knows? I'm excited that Gareth Edwards is going to be directing. I personally thought that the Godzilla 2014 movie was fantastic. Of course, a lot of teasing for Godzilla, but at the same time, it really stuck with what the original film did, because the original Godzilla film barely had Godzilla in it at all. So this kind of, was a reference to that original film. So I'm excited that he is actually going to be directing, so I'm excited to see what he does with that. But for the instance of the name, I mean, like I said, the name could mean anything. The name could basically just be a name. It could be just a subplot, or just something they threw in. Or it could mean everything. I mean, look at The Force Awakens. You look at Star Wars The Force Awakens, that subtitle, it's basically referencing that maybe a new Sith becomes about him. Obviously, I need to wait till the Star Wars Episode 7 talk, but that's what I'm trying to say, is that Rogue One could mean very little, or it could mean very much. There's just no telling. But for my personal opinion, if I had to personally pick what timeline the Star Wars Rogue One, the first spinoff, is going to be in, my personal opinion, I would like it to be in the time frame of 7, 8, 9, so we're not really, backtracking and doing all that. If they want to do a set of films, or a film that is going to be set in the past, they need to let everybody know ahead of time, to the fans that maybe don't know about episodes 1, 2, and 3, or whatever, or 4, 5, and 6, if they're not really freshening up on that they need to go back and watch those films so they can get kind of understanding of what the spin-off film is going to be that is set during those films back then. But who knows what's going to happen, but that's basically what we know for now. So Rogue One sounds pretty cool, interesting name, but we'll have to see more and go from there. So anyways, let's jump into Star Wars Episode 7, 8, and 9. Of course, we've seen the trailer for Episode 7, the little teaser really, and honestly the best part, as we all know, the best part was the Millennium Falcon showing. Now, the reason why I teased a little bit, and if you look online, there's been some articles going around that there will be an official trailer coming out on Star Wars Celebration Day soon. I cannot remember when Star Wars Celebration is, but there is a rumor that the first official trailer will be dropping around that time or at that event for Star Wars Celebration Day. And the rumor is that we're going to see a lot of the original. We're going to see the original cast within it. We're going to see some really cool shots. And supposedly the final shot, is going to be a hooded figure, and it turns out to be Luke Skywalker, bearded, and all of that, and that's how the final the shot is for the trailer. But I think apparently Disney or somebody came out and confirmed that that is not the case, and that is not the trailer. But let's say hypothetically it is, with showing the original cast finally within this episode 7, and seeing them in the trailer would be so awesome, and to see that final shot of Luke Skywalker in a hooded figure, and then it's Luke Skywalker showed at the very end. That'd be the most badass part, I think, of the whole trailer if this was true. I am really excited for this film, and honestly, I want to personally thank Disney for buying this, because George Lucas for the longest time was not going to do anything. I mean, once he did the prequel trilogy and got all the slamming he got, and basically people hating on them, he didn't want to touch it again. And I mean, I think he was burnt out from Star Wars, and so I'm glad that he signed the deal with Disney. And I know some people are against it and people didn't like that, but honestly, think about this. If George Lucas did not sell to Disney and allowed them to make these films and all these announcements and all this, then Star Wars would not be dead, but there would be no films. We would not have any films to speculate and talk about and to finally see on the big screen. If George Lucas passed away without signing a deal with Disney, or anybody for that matter, to basically sell the rights to Star Wars, then his family more than likely probably would never sell it, and probably would ask for extremely more amount of money than $4 billion, and no one would touch it. So I'm glad that he signed the deal, because we're getting episode 7, 8, 9. Now, Star Wars episode 7 is introducing a lot of new characters. Now, obviously, I could go through the Wikipedia and try to read the names off that apparently have been confirmed as their names of their characters. But I just want to speculate a little bit about what the film, where the film is going to be heading in what direction. Because there's a lot of rumors and speculation that between the events of 7, 8, 9, that basically the original cast are going to be kind of phased out, and it's going to be focusing on the new generation. Mark Hamill, I believe, who plays Luke Skywalker, of course, Mark Hamill, gave an interview talking about that this film is more about the newer generation, and you're going to see us, but then it's the newer generation of characters you're going to be seeing within 7, 8, and 9, or basically within 7, which that's fine, but I mean, I think a lot of people are more excited for this trilogy of films, or episode 7 particularly here as we're discussing, is because of the fact that it's the original cast is returning, and we're seeing Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia. We're seeing these characters again. Chewbacca, we're seeing R2-D2, C-3PO. We're seeing these characters again, and it really makes people really happy. And who can blame them? These characters have really made a generation. The films, the original trilogy, really set a huge wave of geekness, and people, following it forever and ever and ever, and loving everything, and loving all the expanded universe books and all these stories that supposedly happened in between points and after episode 6, that are of course entitled Star Wars Legends now, because they're not official canon, but people loved it so much. I mean, and seeing these characters back again, I know they're older, I know that they're not what they used to be, but that's not the point. The point is, we get to see these characters again in a new way. We get to see them in an older age. We get to see them basically grow into their own and grow into these characters, and we're finally going to see them again. So I'm very excited. Regardless of how much they're in the film, as long as they're in the film enough for me personally to feel like they've impacted the film, they're actually there for a purpose, and not shoehorning them in just because they're the original cast. I hope that they have a huge part, and I hope they do an amazing job, and I'm hoping that they'll be within all 3 films, and we'll get to enjoy them for a very long time like the original trilogy. Now let's look on here about, talk a little bit about episode 8 and 9, but basically episode 8, because we have no information on 9. But in addition, Bob Iger, who is the chairman, I believe, is he the chairman? Yeah, chairman and CEO of Disney, also confirmed that Rian Johnson, I'm probably butchering his name, I'm sorry there, will write and direct Star Wars Episode 8. Now, apparently he has been rumored for a while, Mr. Johnson here, who's now been confirmed, but he has been rumored, but it's official, he will write and direct Star Wars Episode 8. Now, here's the interesting part. Now, it's been rumored for a while because the way they had it set up and the way they were announcing it was that Episode 7 was going to be coming out in December of 2015. That's confirmed. December of 2016, a year later, will be Star Wars Rogue One, which has been recently announced the title. So the rumor was that Episode 8 was going to come out in December of 2017, and then the spinoff in between 8 and 9 would come out in December of 2018. So basically, each year at the end of December, there's a new Star Wars. So every year we got a Star Wars film. At the end of each year, a new Star Wars film. This is where they did the big twist here. Now they throw this curveball in. So after December of 2016, a year later after Force Awakens, we get Rogue One. Sorry about that. Star Wars Episode 8 is set to be released on May 26, 2017. So, soon after we get Rogue One, the spin-off film, within a few months in May, we're going to be getting Episode 8. Now, this is pretty interesting. I wonder why they're doing that. I mean, they probably looked at their schedule and probably looked at the big scope of things and went, well, we could obviously have a Star Wars film a year, always at the end of December, but we could always push stuff forward. I mean, think about this. If Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, made $1.5 billion, or it made almost $2 billion. I mean, obviously, it's Star Wars alone. Even if it's not great and amazing, but it's good, people are going to go see it several times, and it's going to be a big, huge, it's going to crush the box office. It's just going to destroy everything. So, The Force Awakens is probably going to make so much money that Disney is thinking, if we could easily push this back till 2 years after December 2015, so December 2017, 2 years exactly later, we have Episode 8, or we can push it up to May, so we can get these films done, so we don't have to worry about them anymore and worry about scheduling. If we get them done quickly and we know the story, we know where we're going, we can do that. So Episode 8 is happening in May of 2017. So that makes me wonder, when is going to be the spin-off film supposedly in 2018? Is it going to be in January of 2018, or is it going to be in the middle of the year in 2018, a year later, and then in January or something of 2019, we're going to get Episode 9? I mean, if they're pushing stuff up, I mean, if we have a year in between Force Awakens and Rogue One, and we have 5 months or so, roughly, depending on what date, they start in the theaters and all that, and what month they're in. Basically, from Rogue One to Episode 8 is roughly 5 months or so. And then if they did the thing of Episode 8 to the spinoff film, like Episode 7 to Rogue One, Episode 8 to spinoff could be a year, and then they could do a whole thing where they have it like 5 months, or have it in the beginning of 2019, have Episode 9, and then we'll be done with those, and then we can continue on doing other stuff. So if that's the case, I mean, who knows what scheduling they're going to do? All they have to worry about is making sure they don't schedule any Star Wars films overlapping one of their own franchise films. So they can't put, Episode 9 at the same time we're going to get like Avengers Part 2 of Infinity War or something. They don't want to do that. They want to make sure they have plenty of time. And even someone referenced that 3 weeks after Guardians of the Galaxy 2 comes out from Marvel Studios, which of course is owned by Disney, that 3 weeks after Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Star Wars Episode 8 is coming out, and everyone's like, oh my god, they're going to hurt themselves. No, they're not. Everyone's going to go see Guardians of the Galaxy 2 that wants to see it, and they're going to see it again maybe, and then of course they're going to go see Episode 8, so why would it hurt themselves? It makes no sense at all. But for me personally, I hope that within 7 we have the original cast enough to where 8 and 9, they're still going to be relevant and keep them in there for a purpose. I don't want whoever is directing Episodes 7, 8, and 9, I don't care. I just don't want the original cast and the original people in the original trilogies to keep getting thrown back into the 7, 8, and 9 film just because they're the original cast. I want them to be there for relevance. So Episode 8 should have them at some point in Episode 9. Now, Andy Serkis has been rumored to be playing a Darth Sidious type character. Darth Sidious, of course, was, Darth Vader's, master. Darth Sidious was a part of the whole movement of Episodes 1, 2, and 3. It was, of course, Chancellor Palpatine, played by the same actor, by the way. Pretty interesting and little tidbit there. But if Andy Serkis is playing a type of Darth Sidious type character, then I'm wondering if his apprentice, like Darth Vader was to Darth Sidious, if the new Darth character that Andy Serkis is supposedly playing is the little tease of the Sith we got to see with the cross blade, or the new lightsaber that people was complaining about and bitching about or loving. So if that's the case, then that makes sense of why it's called Star Wars: The Force Awakens, because a new Sith has arisen, and blah blah blah. But yeah, episode 7, 8, 9. Bring them on! I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I yelled into the mic. I probably should not have done that. Let's jump off into the prequel trilogy. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this because we have Star Wars news, we had Episode 8 news, and a little speculation of Star Wars 7, 8, 9, and of course the big news about Rogue One. So might as well talk about canon, which is Star Wars Episode 1 through 6, 7, 8, and 9, the spin-off films moving forward from Disney. Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels. There's a couple comic books coming out and a couple of books that are official Star Wars canon. That means they actually happened. So I might as well talk a little bit about canon that I know, which is episodes 1 through 3 and 4 and 6. Prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. So to the prequel trilogy, there has been a lot of hate, and I understand. They're not good films. They're not, because it felt like that at George Lucas at one point. It felt like he didn't really. I don't think he really understood what he was doing at the time. I think he was just trying to cater to a younger audience at some moments, and at other moments he wasn't really understanding what made 4 and 5 and 6 really good to a lot of fans, what really made people love those films. I mean, look at Jar Jar Binks. I mean, that character was created, I think, just for the kids in the audience to laugh. I mean, it was just a horrible character, a horrible decision. And honestly, you got Liam Neeson to play a freaking Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn, people. And he dies in the end of episode 1, and then Darth Maul dies too. Well, of course he didn't die because he was brought back in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, I believe, yes, at some point. So he wasn't officially dead. But the way they interpreted it for a long time was that he was dead. But you killed off Qui-Gon Jinn. I mean, come on. If you're going to have Liam Neeson, you might as well have... I mean, honestly... better writing and better direction. Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, should have been where Qui-Gon died. Because that's when Obi-Wan can take over as being master, and then, of course, Anakin, who becomes Darth Vader, is apprentice at the end of Episode 2 into Episode 3, but, so that happened. But honestly, just going through by film, Episode 1 was just a nightmare. There was not really that many good scenes. I mean, honestly, when you watch it, it's just like, okay, the only fun parts, which are very few and far between, are the lightsaber fights, especially with Darth Maul. That two-sided lightsaber, to me, was freaking epic. That's the one good thing that really came out of that film, besides Liam Neeson playing Qui-Gon Jinn, the master of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and seeing Obi-Wan as a young child. I mean, as a young apprentice, not a child, but essentially a child. He's still trying to learn how to become a Jedi, and so that was basically the only really good things. Everything else, Anakin as a kid, who gives a crap? The pod race, sure, but I mean, come on. It was thrown in, the pod race is thrown in because they had to make a video game out of it, so why not? Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, that was an interesting direction. I mean, I personally did not like the look of Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan looked like, his hair was too long. I mean, they should have just cut his hair a little bit. I mean, it just looked kind of strange to me personally. Just the way it looked. I mean, Qui-Gon Jinn had long hair, but at least Qui-Gon Jinn pulled it off right. Obi-Wan looked silly, but Attack of the Clones, I mean, it was cool to introduce these clone troopers, and so we got to see kind of an introduction of what becomes of stormtroopers, because clone troopers is basically the prequel of the stormtroopers, so it made sense why they did that, because, I mean, how can you explain a humongous group of people that follow Darth Vader and all this stuff in 4, 5, and 6? Well, there was clone troopers back then, and then it switched over, blah, 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 to regular people, but this is essentially what happened before, so... the only good thing about that whole entire film was basically the Yoda and Count Dooku fight. That was the only thing I personally thought that was really good. I mean, Yoda was pretty awesome in the film. Mace Windu, of course, that character. I mean, the whole big scene where all them Jedi are fighting in that big arena, that was really cool. But, I mean, besides that, I mean, it's another film that really... It didn't have really good direction, in my personal opinion. The direction of it just didn't seem like it was right. It just felt like they weren't really trying too hard. Now, Revenge of the Sith, to me personally, Revenge of the Sith is the best film out of the prequel trilogy. The best out of the prequel, not the entire not the entire film slate, but out of the prequels 1 through 3, Revenge of the Sith episode number 3 is the best one. And the reason why is because we finally got to see the turn of Anakin to Darth Vader, but in a really weird way. Because they gave him the name Darth Vader, but there's no real meaning behind why his name is Darth Vader. It's just Darth Vader. He basically him and Darth Sidious both killed Mace Windu, which kind of sucked. But I think the best part of the film was honestly the lightsaber fight between Anakin, of course, and Obi-Wan. That thing, to me, was awesome. A lot of people criticize it for being too technical and being too like it looked like they were just, it was training, like they weren't really like actually fighting. Like it didn't feel like they were actually fighting for their lives. It's just like it looked like a controlled trained martial arts thing where they just replicated what they were training. I mean, there's a whole video online where you can actually watch them do the entire fight scene with these like specialized sticks or these specialized lightsabers, and they can hit the lightsabers against each other. And they did the entire thing in a practice without, of course, none of the special effects and showing where they're fighting, but it's a whole video of them training, and it's really awesome. If you can find it online, it's really, really cool. There's no stopping. So, I mean, there's probably stops and cuts within that entire huge fight, because there was a lot of stuff they did within that fight. So there's probably a lot of cuts, but there's a video that I saw personally that had them doing the entire fight without no stops and no cuts. They did it basically almost exactly how the movie portrays it. So it was pretty cool. But, besides that, I mean, it was kind of also stupid to basically go, okay, this is Luke and Leia getting their names, but there's no reason by why their names are Luke and Leia. It just happens. I mean, I'm not saying that Revenge of the Sith is an amazing film. It's the best out of the three, which is it's not really saying much, because, I mean, they're all three are bad in their own ways. But Star Wars Episode 3 did have some cool things. We finally got to see Darth Vader, and we got to see the building of the Death Star at the end, but there was nothing really to it. So there's that. I mean, obviously these films could have been amazing and awesome, but it just didn't happen because George Lucas, in my personal opinion, didn't put that much effort into the films. I feel like if he put any effort into them, he put most of his effort into Episode 3 was the one. Revenge of the Sith, that's the only one, because you really have to tie in a lot of things into why 4, 5, and 6 happened, why he became Darth Vader. So you had to tie in all this stuff in, so he got some of it right, but not all of it. So, anyways, to the original trilogy, and we'll be done with this podcast, everybody. Episodes 4 and 5 and 6, like I was saying before earlier in this podcast, that episodes 4, 5, and 6 are just... they're masterpieces in their own way. I mean, obviously, people don't look at them for the simple fact of being like the perfected acting and all this stuff that people look for in classic films and stuff like that. But, I mean, these films created a humongous fan base and have continued for now forever. I mean, there are millions upon millions upon millions of Star Wars fans because of these films, because of the original trilogy. People fell in love with Luke. People fell in love with Leia and Han and Chewie and C-3PO and R2-D2 and Lando and all these characters. And Darth Vader, from these episodes 4, 5, and 6, Darth Vader became probably the most famous villain of all time, or one of the most famous villains ever, because these films had so much meaning to them and they had depth, but at the same time it didn't feel cheesy. I mean, at some moments, if you look at it like the original cuts of the film, not remastered and none of that bullshit, but if you look at the actual original cuts, I mean, some of it looks kind of cheesy, but it's so far ahead of its time at the time when they were released. It's so far ahead of what it looks like. But I mean, there are some cheesy moments, but not to the sense of where it makes the film bad. The film is just so great. The films are just mind-blowing. I mean, I know Episode 6 had the Ewoks, and a lot of people did not like the Ewoks, but people looked past the Ewoks and still found the goodness of that film. And I'll admit the Ewoks they're not that great. I mean, obviously, it just felt like something George Lucas. It was the beginning of what he did for episodes 1, 2, and 3. But we got to see the final fight of Darth Vader and Luke, and they had that heart-to-heart moment. You see the death of Darth Sidious. I mean, you see a bunch of really cool things where it basically took all of these subplots and the plots that were leading up to Episode 6 from 4 and 5 and finished them off very nicely in Return of the Jedi. It was such a phenomenal ending to this trilogy. I mean, this trilogy will live on forever, and I think that's the beauty of it, isn't it? That a trilogy of films that was created not recently, but way back in the day, back when, back before everyone can film and add in CGI everywhere and everything's green screen. Not that it's a bad thing, because obviously there's some movies that require green screen, but I'm saying that before all this stuff where you can make everything look perfect regardless of how crappy or good your story is, they made a trilogy of films that stand the test of time, that has a huge generations of followers, and they are just such phenomenal films. Luke Skywalker is probably one of the most beloved characters ever. Within like type of like space films or hero films in general. I mean, Luke really went from just being this regular kid, this regular guy, to being, the guy who basically defeated the Empire and defeated the freaking Sith and defeated them and turned his dad around at the end and showed his dad that not everything is bad, and he fixed everything. I mean, it's just such a very classic story. I mean, I loved Yoda. Yoda was my personal favorite character out of everybody, I mean, I know episodes 1, 2, and 3, he was, CGI, but I mean, Yoda's just one of those characters, if getting off topic here for a second, but we're almost done. Yoda, I mean, if they did a film series or did a spin-off film for Yoda and did a Yoda film, that'd be awesome, but episodes 4 and 5 and 6. What else can I say except for repeating myself? They're phenomenal films, and I'm glad that they exist. I mean, obviously, I'm not really a fan of the remasters and the adding new stuff and the CGI and all that crap that George Lucas did afterwards to remaster the films. The original films, as they are just perfect. You don't have to add any more stuff. They're just perfect as they are. So, I cannot wait to see what happens in Star Wars 7, 8, and 9, because 4, 5, and 6 really set up a great storyline, and I'm hoping they can not really repeat the same story, but come up with a very unique story involving the original cast and having, these new people come in, these new characters, and having a series of films that really stand the test of time again, and have a newer generation of audiences that may love 4, 5, and 6, but will also fall in love and create a whole new generation of fans for 7, 8, 9. So let's hope for the best. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you guys so much. I'm done rambling and dumb talking. So once again, thank you guys for listening. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.